It's dangerous to go alone. Take this. And with that quote begins the over 30-year adventure that is yet to end, The Legend of Zelda. With its original open-world design forcing players to explore every crevice of Hyrule in order to track down Ganon and retrieve the Triforce, this series paved the way for action-adventure games. And over the course of its long history, Nintendo has continued to push the medium forward, not fearful of implementing new mechanics that make each game in the series feel unique unto themselves. But at its core, the simplicity and vibrancy of its characters and lore, especially the silent protagonist that is Link, keeps fans coming back while ever attracting newer generations. This, my friends, is The Legend of Zelda. And yes, Zelda is a girl.
Hi, welcome back to the Obsessive Compulsive Gamer Podcast. Today I will be hosting. I'm returning. My name is Frank. We also have some returning guests. You all are familiar with Bobby in the center there. We have Val returning. And we have a special guest because this is his second podcast in a row, considering, we've done so many episodes without him, but now it's like, how did we do it without him? And we have Mr. Aldo.
Woo! I would like to make a correction, sir, but this would not be his second consecutive video, as the first one is being released tomorrow, and this one will be released at a significantly later date.
Well, as far as recording goes.
That's such a YouTube comment.
Exactly.
So, a second consecutive recording, I should say. But we are coming here tonight, Friday night before Halloween, to talk about The Legend of Zelda.
Perfect. Should we have worn costumes for this? I actually didn't think about that.
I wore a green shirt.
I have my Zelda shirt.
Yeah, hey, see me too. Look.
Hey, it's George.
Yeah.
Hey,
send me George.
That shirt can be found at our merch store. So if you go to ocgamer.org, it links you to our merch store. Yeah, there's a little plug there for you.
Shameless self-promotion.
Well, hey, who else is going to promote us?
If we don't.
So Zelda, this is a franchise that actually spans 30 plus years. I looked it up. Official games, there's about 19 titles in the Zelda canon, timeline, whatever you want to call it. And it spans, 6-7 plus systems. I mean, this is one of Nintendo's big four, because you've got Zelda, you've got Metroid, you've got Mario, and you have Pokemon. And honestly, if Nintendo were to just do games for those four, they'd still be able to make millions and millions and millions of dollars because of how established they are in the industry. So, Zelda, as we're all familiar with, did start on the Nintendo. If you want to call it the Famicom, whatever. It was, would you call it isometric, Bobby? The top down?
The isometric view in the original, probably.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Or no, I'm sorry. I think they refer to it as three-quarter view.
Three-quarter view. Because I think the isometric is like where it's at an angle.
Right.
Yeah.
Like
Zaxxon.
Right. I was going to say Super Mario RPG, but yeah, Zaxxon is another example.
Mm-hmm. So it started on the Famicom. We had 2 titles there. Then, of course, it moved to Super Nintendo, which we had A Link to the Past. And there was no other titles on the Super Nintendo, right? No. At least not here.
There was that Satellaview. That's a Satellaview one, or I don't know if that's how
right.
But in Japan,
the stone tablets.
It had the live broadcast recording to go alongside with it. But you had to play it at that specific time.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Crazy.
I mean, now with emulators, they have that full set, so now you can play it as a complete game. But the
you don't get that live broadcast
though.
Yeah, with the narrator.
Right. Yeah, you're missing all that, the extras that go with it. And then, so wasn't the stone tablets, or I'm trying to remember. So, because the first one that was released on the Satellaview was actually a remake of the original.
Yes.
But that's separate from the stone tablets, right?
Yes, completely separate. Yeah, Stone Tablets is based on Link to the Past. It's the same graphics, same map.
Same map, right?
But your characters actually, you can actually choose to be male or female, and it's supposed to be a representation of the player.
Right.
Like, it's not Link; it's somebody different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there's those, and then of course they went to 64 with Ocarina and Majora's Mask, and then GameCube and Game Boy. I'm sorry, I kind of skipped that. Game Boy Advance, the DS. Were there any titles on the DS? I can't remember.
Phantom Hourglass and
Minish Cap.
No, Minish Cap was GBA, Game Boy Advance.
GBA. Okay, yeah. Let's see. So GameCube with Twilight Princess, and
previously Wind Waker.
Wind Waker,
yeah.
That's right.
And then Twilight Princess was cross-gen with GameCube and Wii.
That's
and then
correct.
Wii U later.
Right, with the HD release.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And Wind Waker. I mean, this franchise, it's really had a huge impact on the gaming industry itself. And, I think it's even transcended the gaming industry because it's kind of a household name. The Legend of Zelda, I think if you were to ask like the average person who's older than, 30, they would probably know this franchise. And, considering all the games, all the media, I didn't really want to touch on that stuff. Maybe we can get into it later. But
excuse me, Frank.
But this is a game series that pretty much defined action games from the 8-bit era on. And I mean, us talking about it today, for me, it's not really so much one of my beloved like franchises. I actually like the idea of it more than I've really played and love the franchise itself. I'm really respectful of the lore and the dedication that Nintendo has really put into this franchise because there's so much, with not just the games, the media. Unfortunately, not enough collector's editions, in my opinion, but that's another conversation. But that kind of leads us to our first question. And since there's so many games, and I know most of you have played at least 5+, I wanted to start with what is your favorite game and what is your least liked game? I thought we'd change it up a little bit since there's so many games in this franchise. So let's go ahead and start with Val.
Okay, so just to go back on the media comment, I actually was introduced to Legend of Zelda through the Super Mario Brothers Super Show with the Friday morning Legend of Zelda cartoons. That was my first introduction to Legend of Zelda. So I'm not going to shit on it because that's how I got into the series. Either way, that's a really tough question for me to answer. So I have different answers for my favorite. My overall is the original Legend of Zelda. It's not only my favorite Zelda, it's actually my favorite video game of all time. It's not even a question. It's a game that I spent the most time ever playing in my life. I still play through the first quest at least once a year. It's the game my brother and I bonded over growing up because we had played together. We actually had to borrow the game from my neighbor, and it didn't come with the manual or anything. We didn't have the map. And I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, the original came with a full map of the overworld, and it told you where things were, right? Is that true?
I'm not sure. We're
talking about the map that came with the cartridge.
Yeah. I think there was. If I'm not mistaken, there was a fold-out map that came with the game, and it told you where the dungeons were and like the shops and stuff. We didn't have that, so we had to basically bomb every wall, burn every bush,
burn every bush,
and every single spot in that game we had to figure out on our own. And at the time, it was grueling and stressful. But thinking about it now, it was an incredible experience to actually explore it yourself and just find this stuff. And every time, you bomb that wall and that little tune pops up when you found the door, it was thrilling, right? Because you had no idea what was behind that door. So that is probably easily my number one game. More modern, I really, really loved Breath of the Wild, and I really loved Ocarina of Time because I just played those for the first time within the past year. I'm not going to try and ramble too much, but Ocarina of Time, I think I'm going to put it there because it's a game that completely changed my mind about the Nintendo 64. Until I played it, I used to kind of shit on that console. I thought the graphics are stupid. They're so primitive. How could people enjoy these games now? And I hate the controller.
So much fog.
Yeah, so much volumetric fog and stuff like that. But after I played the game and finished it, I sat back and I thought, I can completely understand why people say this is one of the best games ever made, because it really is. It's the perfect amount of the overworld isn't too big, but it's big enough for it to feel big, right?
Mm-hmm.
The gameplay is great. The storyline is beautiful. The boss fights are so much fun. Even the grindy stuff like collecting Big Goron's sword was still fun, even though it's such a pain in the ass. So that game completely changed my mind about the console. So I had to just add it there as one of my favorites.
Wait, so did you ever play Ocarina of Time 3D?
I've never ever played that game more than like a few minutes until maybe 6 months ago when I finished Breath of the Wild, and I said, well, my wife wanted me to play Majora's Mask.
My wife.
Yeah, my wife.
My wife.
How topical.
He's back.
Yeah, he's back. No, she wanted me to play Majora's Mask because she's never seen that one played through, and it turns out I couldn't play it because I hadn't played Ocarina of Time. So I said, well, let me play this one first, and I did, and I loved every second of it. It was just an amazing experience. I'm not finished with Majora's Mask yet. If you guys want to give spoilers, that's fine. I don't care. It's my fault. But it's been fun. It's much different than Ocarina of Time. I'll say that.
Awesome. That's really interesting. You know, it's funny how those experiences when we're young really stay with us, especially with something like gaming. Because I think for us, gaming is timeless. You know, we can, since we grew up in kind of the golden age and the rise of video games, I think we got to experience it in the best way, you know, being, you know, adolescents and just kind of growing up with the consoles and stuff like that. So, I can totally see why the 64 at that time, those polygons compared to something like the PlayStation or the Saturn, yeah, it didn't look as good, but that gameplay is,
yeah,
you know,
that's right.
And then Breath of the Wild, I've seen it. I actually have it, and I finally got a Switch this year. I haven't played it yet, but it's so vast, and the fact that it's an open world, you know, it's Zelda GTA, I call it.
Yeah, actually, Mike was the one that told me if you enjoy the original Legend of Zelda, you will love Breath of the Wild because how much exploration there is. And it's true because
back to the original, it really does.
Yeah, it does. I remember I was looking for shrines because I was trying to build up my number of shrines I'd finished, and I was climbing this gigantic fucking mountain in the northeast side of the map.
And it started raining.
Yeah, and it started raining, and I was completely lost. And I was thinking, man, this is so cool that you can actually get lost in this game. And I was mesmerized by how much detail the developers put into how to make this world so big and so detailed. And I could go on forever with Breath of the Wild, so I don't want to take up all the podcast just talking about it.
No, you're good, man.
I mean, to add to that, like when they originally did the design for Breath of the Wild, I don't know if you guys heard about this, but they actually designed it in the original Legend of Zelda style. Like they actually built a Legend of Zelda game, a 2D game, like in the old Nintendo fashion, so they could build that whole world. And then they took that entire schematic that they built, and then they turned it into a 3D version of that same game. And they did it to test different things. They did it to test the world. They did it to test different mechanics that they could do in the game. So they really did. They really did build a blueprint based off of the original Legend of Zelda in order to build this new Breath of the Wild game.
Is there a way to see those development plans somewhere?
Well, Nintendo's released some samples as far as like a video of what the game looks like. Because again, it's an actual game that they built that they could interact with. But of course, it is for testing. Okay. So I mean, it'd be nice if they would release it. But knowing Nintendo, it may never happen. But I know on YouTube they have some videos. I think IGN was the first one to release it. At least the article where I read it, where they had talked about that and showed some images of what they used. So yeah, you can definitely find some stuff on there for it.
Cool. Yeah, I gotta look that up. That sounds really interesting.
Wait, so sorry, just go back to the question really quick. So what's your like least liked, or at least the one you played it and you're like, yeah, this is not really for me?
Okay. So there's some answers I have. What is Wanda Gamelon, I guess, because it's technically the worst fucking Zelda. Well,
can we include those?
That's what I'm gonna say. I don't know if that's a fair thing to say. They're technically Zelda games.
Yeah.
And I've technically played them.
But you didn't like it at all, did you?
Oh,
so I wouldn't even say at least liked.
Because it was there's no chance to like it at all. It doesn't give itself a chance to be liked. You know? How can you include them on this list? That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, fair enough. I'm not gonna crap on Legend of Zelda 2 because I didn't grow up with the game. I give kudos to Nintendo for trying something different, from straying from the original formula and making it, a side scroller, more actiony game. It's not my cup of tea. Like I said, I didn't have the game when I grew up, so it's not really my thing. The one I've actually finished that was my least favorite is Twilight Princess. And there's only one reason I didn't like it as much is because I played it on the Wii, and you have to play with those waggle controls where you have to, throw your Wiimotes around.
I love those controls.
Oh my god, no! Playing through that game was a nightmare. Like I felt like the game was playing itself at some points. Like the controls are terrible. Like it feels like you have very little control over Link himself when you play it that way. I wish I'd gone back and played on the GameCube instead.
I challenge you to play it again because I played that game twice on the Wii and never had any problems with control. I mean, it is so amazing to be able to shoot your bow and arrow with the Wii controller. Aim with all the different weapons. I mean, I'm not saying that it's better than the GameCube version, but I think a lot of people for some reason have it stuck in their head that because you swing your remote to swing the sword, it somehow, makes the game worse. And I never had any control issues with that game. I mean, the only time you use the pointer again is when you're aiming. But when you swing your sword, you just make a swinging motion, and he still has a mapped motion for his sword. So you're not doing it. It's not like Skyward Sword, where you had to use the Wii Motion Plus, where it literally followed your motion with the thing. But we'll get into more details about that when we talk about our most and least favorite, because I'm going to have a couple comments about those. But
it's funny you bring up those controls, Val, because it's like I remember at the time I was still living at my parents' house when that game came out.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember like playing it and my mom walking into my room. So I'm just sitting there like, just looking like a damn moron. So she's just staring at me, and she leaves. She comes back an hour later, and then she sees me playing with a toy plastic guitar. It's like, I don't know, if doctors, if psychiatrists were making good money during that time. All these concerned parents, I don't know, but
my son is not living in reality.
I just had to inject that there.
That's hilarious.
Well, I mean, no, I was just gonna say, you did have the option for the GameCube and then also the Wii U version. So
yeah,
I think if anything, if the controls bother you that much, then you should go back and definitely try the GameCube version. Because the Wii U version, you don't have a Wii U, right?
No, I do have the GameCube one, and I fired it up just to test it, and I liked it a lot more using the controller. So I actually might want to give that a try again.
Well, the interesting thing too,
I think you should,
is the Wii version is a mirrored version of the GameCube one, because they assumed everyone's going to be right-handed, right? Most people, 90% of the population is right-handed, but and Link, for those of you who don't know, is left-handed traditionally in the games. So the Wii version of Twilight Princess is the first version where he's right-handed. the Wii U version, the HD one, is a remaster of the original GameCube. So he's back to being left-handed. So everything is flipped opposite. So like for me, playing Twilight Princess on the HD version, everything was swapped, and I kind of, had to be like, wait, I remember this being over here, and having to go in the opposite direction. But yeah, because of that, the motion controls, they had to mirror it.
Well, I didn't. Oh, yeah, I think I did know that, but that's because you told me about it.
Mm-hmm. And you'd think they would have just mirrored Link, but they actually mirrored the whole game, from my understanding. So
yeah,
I mean, the maps and everything.
It actually kind of makes me more interested to play it again,
right? Because
it's completely backwards from what I played it the first time. So yeah, it makes the replay worth it, I think.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for sharing that, Val. Let's go ahead and move on with Aldo. Same question: favorite game and least liked game.
My favorite in the Zelda canon, I guess it'd be, is Wind Waker. On the GameCube. I do also love the one on the HD remake on the Wii U as well. Beautiful game. But it was I didn't really think much about it originally, because I was like everyone else that when they first showed it at that E3, like what we were promised, like this adult looking Link and stuff, and we're getting this cartoony shit. Like I was like, and I mind you, at the time when that game came out, I was like in my early 20s, so even more so, I was like, this is kiddie shit, That was my original attitude towards it. And then I was working at EB Games at the time in the Cielo Vista Mall, and it was I think it was one of the other guys that I worked with that he kept like going on and on about it. So he just kind of convinced me. All right, at the time we were allowed to take games home as long as we wrote reviews about him. We were allowed to take games home. So that's why there's it goes to say that there are all those open case games also, that people can't stand. I don't blame them. I used to piss me off too, but it is what it is.
Wait,
but
did you write any reviews, Aldo?
I did. I did write reviews.
Can we still find them online?
No, dude, they were all like literally written by hand on paper in a binder.
Oh,
this is like 2000, 2001 we're talking about here. I mean, like, yeah, there was internet and there were like forums and stuff, but no, none of that shit was online. But yeah, it was just like, so like for the other employees can go through that binder. Oh, well, this employee said blah 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 about this game, So yeah, it was pretty useful for the people that worked there that didn't give a shit about games. It was useful for them. It did. They did learn a lot. But yeah, I took it home, and it was just like all the early scenes in the game when Link is like leaving his grandmother and everything. That shit was like just pulling at my heartstrings. Like the way the ship's sailing away, and you just see her little at the house, all standing there on the port, like on the patio, all sad, and like that was the moment that drew me into that game. And then just going off on your own, like on that, just going off on your own in that fuck, I forgot the name of that sail. What was it? Like that dragon sailboat thing? I forgot what it's called. But just going around like that world in that, it just gave you like this, like a real great sense of adventure. Like if you're really sailing around the world on your own, like by yourself, it brought that, like it made you feel that. And and that was one of my favorite things of the game, was just literally just sailing around that world. It was just so huge and vast, and just finding things in the middle of nowhere, tiny little islands and whatnot. And it's just that game really, like, I just love that game a lot.
Wasn't that a common complaint about the game? Is that, oh, there's so much sailing, that's all you ever do?
I mean, like, there's like, but that's, I mean, if I like that, I know, like, I could see how people would complain about that there's so much sailing, that's all you do. I found a lot of like comfort in that. Some of the time, like some of the breaks in the action, and like when there was like the sailing parts, was like a good break in the action for me. It was a time to relax. It was a time to relax, contemplate life. It gave you that ability. It was cool, and that's why I like that game so much. And also, like, just like all the characters' mannerisms, because they went with that cell shaded design. A lot of focus was like on like all like their look and everything, like with their face, their facial animations and everything.
Yeah, they're really expressive.
Very expressive. That's the word I was looking for. Thank you. They're very expressive.
And I initially didn't like the art design either, but I remember when I actually like sat down and watched some gameplay of it, and it's like you're playing a real life cartoon, not real life cartoon. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah.
But and that's one thing I really love about Wind Waker. It kind of reminds me of like Journey. You're playing an animated kind of movie, and it's just so it's beautiful to look at. That world is so vibrant. The color scheme. I mean, that's one thing. Nintendo, their colors are always just so beautiful. It's just so well done. And I think in that game, even on the GameCube, it still looks great today, because a lot of those graphics, they don't age poorly because they got that very distinct art style.
Mm-hmm. And it was that was another thing for me about that game was that it gave you like a great sense of like going out on your own, like you grew up someplace for so long for like you're as a kid, and you get to like a certain age, to say like you move to like another city and you're leaving home. It gave you like a good like sense of that as well, like kind of like you get homesick. I kind of did get homesick playing that game, even like just leaving my grandmother there and my old little grandmother in that house that's like that loft house that's way too big for her, and she can't climb ladders. I don't know how she even bothers cleaning up at the top. It's like, well, I've seen my mother climb a ladder. It's not...
Well, it's like that's part of the reason that they named the first island that you're on is Outset Island, because it's your outset to adventure, right? That's where you're leaving from. It's perfect. And so the name of the boat is the King of Red Lions. Thank you, Ryan, for supplying us with that.
Thank you.
But I mean, it like you said, graphically, it's probably the most perfectly made Zelda game because it's going to stand the test of time just how beautiful it is. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I remember when people were complaining about the game because I think just before that or soon around the time, Soul Calibur 2 had come out on the GameCube and you could play as Link. Mm-hmm. And it was an adult version of Link.
Yeah.
And people were complaining like, wow, look how great Link looks in this game. Why can't we have a game that looks like that? But
I remember like they showed it at that
the Space World 2000.
Space World, there we go. They showed that demo of like Link fighting Ganon.
Right.
And it was like adult Link looked all badass, It was like, and it was well beyond the GameCube's capabilities, like graphically, It was just a pure like a computer rendered type of demo. But that's what everyone was expecting, and they came out with that cell shaded look. It just, what the fuck is this? Yeah. But like you play the game, you totally look past that. You forget that there's even an adult Link.
It's funny because there's a rumor that at that E3 when they revealed the Wind Waker, that when no one clapped, so supposedly Miyamoto, why is no one clapping?
I don't make mistakes.
It's like, what? This is bullshit. People should be clapping.
How did it sell? It didn't sell too well on its initial like GameCube release, right?
Well, I mean,
I'm sorry, go on.
It sold fine. I mean, I want to say it sold well over 2 million copies, but it hadn't sold as well as the previous Zelda game, Ocarina of Time. Because not even Majora's Mask sold as well as Ocarina of Time.
No.
But the big issue was that people also don't take into consideration that the GameCube itself didn't sell as well as the N64 did. So there's a smaller install base as well.
How many units did it sell? It was like 36 million, I think.
Yeah, something like that. It wasn't very big.
Yeah, like GameCube, man. Talk about a console that was really good. That just, it's like the Dreamcast, man. It just got like tossed by the wayside.
Yeah,
and it has such a good library, so many good games. I still have my original GameCube, and actually, that's one of the first consoles I ever bought within the original release date with my own money, because I mean, growing up, my parents would buy me the consoles, and usually I was like a generation or two behind. But that GameCube, when I first got it, I was so excited. Like, I had gotten Smash Brothers and Gauntlet Dark Legacy, and then Resident Evil a couple months later, the remake.
Yeah, but you got to remember what it was against too. Is the juggernaut of the PS2 and
the Xbox
and the original Xbox. I mean, those consoles were enormously popular. And then And people always considered the GameCube to be the kiddie console. Remember that? Like only kids play the GameCube.
Because Nintendo was pushing it as a family system at the time. Remember? They
Right.
Being family orientated.
Same with the Wii.
Yeah. Well, the Wii was like it made more sense with the Wii simply because of the more interactive controls. You know.
Yeah.
So.
You know, and what was it? So the Wind Waker didn't sell too well on that, and then of course they ported it to the Wii U, which I think
it looks amazing.
Yeah, I'm sure it looks amazing, but you know that console itself had a really short shelf life too. So
that one sold less than 14 million units.
It was like
system.
11 or something. It was
and I think it was 13 million something, but it was pretty low. But hey, let's talk about the good times.
Yeah. Okay, so Wind Waker is your favorite. Then what is your least liked?
My least liked, for a very long time, it was Zelda 2. Up until like recent years, because of speedrunning, I fucking love that game now. It's honestly like really way up there as far as it's even like, close to my favorite. But
wow.
But I love Zelda 2 now. But for the longest time, it was Zelda 2.
Have you actually played through the whole thing?
Yeah, I played through the whole thing.
Okay.
I played through the whole thing because of I just would watch a lot of speedrunners like play it, and that's I got caught up in it. I was all like no, this game like is way more fun than people like say it like a lot of people say it's not, you know.
Mm-hmm.
It's a fun game. That's all it is. It's just a fun game. It's not trying to be like anything amazing. It's just trying to be fun, and it accomplishes that. But after saying that, I say like my least favorite now is Spirit Tracks, because it's one of the I don't really play many handheld games. If I do play a handheld game, it's going to be a Zelda game. That's the only reason I have Nintendo handhelds are for Zelda games. And Spirit Tracks it's just trash. That's all I gotta say about it.
What's wrong with it?
It's just boring. It's just a boring game, and it's ugly, and it's because like they did the cel shaded graphics like on the was it the DS, right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they did. It was a cel shaded graphics on the DS, and it's a boring game, and it's just unappealing to look at. It controls like trash. It's just not fun. Just poorly done. I don't know what they were thinking, but I couldn't even get through it all. It didn't like capture enough of my interest to continue playing it, so I didn't play much of it.
That's right. Although you and I share the same in the least favorite Zelda category.
So then let's go ahead and move on to Roberto. We already know your least liked. Let's hear your gripes with the least liked.
Well, like Aldo said, I mean, the Spirit Tracks, it's dull. They're
dull.
The lore is not really utilized. It doesn't feel like it. The whole concept about because since it takes place in the same universe as Wind Waker, the sequel to Wind Waker is Phantom Hourglass, which was on the DS, which is in itself is not a bad Zelda game. It's not great though. It's just fine. But Spirit Tracks is like, it's supposed to be the future where all the water has receded, but now they got to connect all the continents with train tracks. And like, I guess the concept is okay, but it's not utilized in a fun way. You know, when you're moving across the country, it's dull. One of the neat things they did though is that if you have an illegal copy of it, something happens where the train won't stop or it won't allow you to progress. They inserted something in there to prevent you from progressing. So if you get to a point in the game where you can't progress, it's because you stole the fucking game, you asshole. Don't be stealing games.
Wow.
So,
it's like a modern was it Desert Bus? The Sega
Penn and Teller game.
Penn and Teller
the
game.
Penn and Teller game. There you go. Oh, man.
No, but yeah, like exactly, Bobby. Like the concept, like when I heard about it was cool. Like it's the Wind Waker world, but the water's gone.
Right.
That's kind of interesting. Like what's under all that water? You know, that's why I was excited about it. And then no, you don't even get any. Like you don't get much of that. It's just connecting the world, and it's dull.
Yeah, it is dull.
Which handheld is that? You said that's the DS.
That's the DS.
Okay, the original DS.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So the DS had those two Zelda games as far as mainline series. 3DS had what was it called? Link Between Worlds, and then it had the re-releases of Ocarina and Majora's Mask, on the 3D.
Right. Which I would really love to play, but I'm not a handheld kind of person, so I'm kind of hoping, because Nintendo did the Mario, the 3D 3-pack.
They ported it too,
Yeah, I'm really hoping they do a Zelda version of that, but with those versions of Ocarina and Majora's Mask, so I can actually play those.
I don't think that's likely, but
yeah, I know, but
well, I mean, they are now the probably two most popular Zelda games aside from probably Breath of the Wild, just because those are the ones that people speedrun all the time. Those are the ones that people our age probably have the strongest memory for. But like for me personally, I mean, it's tough for me to call my favorite Zelda game because the only ones I haven't played are the CDI ones that we were talking about, but we're not even putting those on the list.
Play them. Just do it.
I mean, I may play them for shits and giggles one day.
Stop the podcast and go fire one to Gamelon.
We got to do this the right way, I guess.
No emulators, CDI.
Yeah, you got to buy original hardware.
You got to buy CDI.
Actual hardware. A working CDI. That's the trick.
Yeah.
So it's hard, man. Because I love so many games, even the games that people hate on, like Skyward Sword, I will defend it. The motion controls and Twilight Princess, I will defend it. The graphical choices with Wind Waker, because ultimately all those games are good games, and in some cases they're great games. But I always have to go back to Link to the Past on the Super Nintendo. That one is
can't go wrong.
It is the pinnacle of 2D design for a Zelda game. It is what every Zelda game since has been based on. I mean, really, as much as we love Ocarina of Time to me is a 3D version of Link to the Past, except instead of traveling between parallel worlds, you're traveling between time. But it's essentially the same makeup. You have almost the same number of dungeons. And it's the same setup. You start off with the 3 main dungeons that you got to get to the Temple of Time. And Link to the Past, it's the 3 pendants that you got to get to the Master Sword. And then once you get that, then guess what? You get to travel to the other world. And then you get to go through more dungeons. There's just less in the other world in Link to the Past. Or Ocarina of Time, I think there's 5. And then in Link to the Past, there's 8. So there's a lot more dungeons to go through. Plus, then you still have Ganon's castle, and then the final battle with Ganon and that pyramid, which is just a battle. But I mean, there's so much to explore in that game. Like in the old Nintendo Powers, they always had these power challenges in which they would tell you to try to beat a game. It's basically, like a speedrun challenge or some kind of, what do you call them? Like a naked run where you're not supposed to get any items or things like that. So in this case, it would be like, try to beat the game with only getting the blue tunic. So the red tunic is the one that gives you the most defense. The blue tunic is like the middle level defense. And so they would tell you things like only beat the game with a blue tunic and a level 3 Master Sword. So of course it takes more hits to beat the enemies and you take more damage with especially the later bosses. So it's a great chance. So my friend, a friend of mine, Jerry, and I, we'd spend hours at his house because he had a Super Nintendo and I didn't at the time. And also he had Legend of Zelda, which I never actually owned a copy of Link to the Past until probably about 15, 16 years ago. So when I was a kid, I never even owned it growing up, but I loved going over and hanging out with him so we could play through it and try to beat those challenges and being able to explore everything. Like I know where all the hearts are at. I know where all the items are at. I know the best time to, get like the flippers, or I have a particular way that I go through the dungeons on every playthrough. And I beat that game at least once a year for like the last, 20 years. Whether it be on emulator or one of the sales that Nintendo has, or now that I have my own copy, sometimes I'll play it on original hardware. And then I love like Aldo with the speedruns. I love watching the speedruns of that game. And now
they're addicting.
They are. But now they've taken the challenge of doing like mixed speedruns where sometimes the items will be in different dungeons and they're randomized. Like, you don't know where you're going to find stuff. Or sometimes they'll do crossover speedruns where they'll do a crossover between Metroid and Zelda. And so you're playing a Zelda game collecting Metroid items, and then you're switching over to Super Metroid, then finding Zelda items. And, as you collect items, then you can use them across the game to then try to beat the game. I mean, it's crazy the randomizers that they come up with. Yeah, I was all confused. It is insane.
Are those ROM hacks?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. They have to be ROM hacks. So, but yeah, it's insane the things that they'll create in order just to create more challenges for themselves. But I mean, that's a testament to just how creative you can be with those games and how creative those games were to begin with. And so, I mean, you guys know I'm a huge Metroid fan, and Super Metroid is my number one game of all time. So it makes sense that Link to the Past would be my favorite Zelda game of all time. I mean, I just love it. It's incredible. But it's so hard to say any other Zelda game in the series is terrible. I mean, even Spirit Tracks is as bad as it is that I didn't, think it was great. I mean, it was fine. I mean, to say it's a bad,
fine. It's trash, dude.
I mean,
well, man, that's kind of why I worded the question so it's least liked.
Yeah.
I mean, because when you play games in a franchise, especially like Zelda, where I mean they're quality games overall. I mean, I'm sure Spirit Tracks, even though it's as disappointing as a Zelda game as it is, it's still probably a better game than like 90% of some of the stuff that's on,
I'd say 60%, but
Drop it a lot.
My point is where that game is a 0 for a Zelda game, it's about a 5 for everything else.
Yeah.
So
there you go.
So
go ahead.
Okay. So I was going to say, I mean, I have not played a Zelda game that I can think of off the top of my head that I haven't enjoyed. There are a few Zelda games I never finished or got a chance to play. Like, I don't know if you guys remember the Capcom Zelda games, the Spirit of the Oracle of Seasons and Oracle of Seasons. And I did play Oracle of Seasons. I have it, but I never got the companion one, Ages. And with that one, of course, if you beat one, that gives you a code where you can put it into the other, so then you can get the ultimate ending. Or my absolute favorite handheld Zelda game is Link's Awakening on the original Game Boy. That is my absolute favorite, and the remake on the Switch is great. It's really good, but it doesn't have the same impact on me as that original did on Game Boy. And then I've never played Minish Cap, so I can't speak towards Minish Cap.
Play it.
Yeah,
it's not a big adventure, but it's fun. I think you'll like it a lot, man. It's very enjoyable.
And that's what I keep hearing. So yeah, I mean, it's a great series. I love it. It's hard to pick my favorite one, but definitely have to go with Link to the Past.
Nice.
Good pick, man.
Yeah. Out of all the games that I played from Zelda, which is a few, I played both on the original NES, never beat them. I played, a little bit of Ocarina, usually it's just a little bit of each of the games just to kind of get a feel for it. But Link to the Past is the one that I would say stuck the longest with, even though I've only beaten the first dungeon. And I was like, all right, Bobby, I'm lost. I don't know what to do. But even being lost, it was just really fun to go through that, that world, sneak into the castle, and then you go through the forest and you're like, oh, look, I found a sword. Oh, I can't get it yet. It's just really, really fun. And, Super Nintendo is one of my favorite consoles of all time. And those 16-bit graphics, they age really well. And actually, so I've had this that I got for Bobby like months ago, but because of COVID, we haven't really seen each other. And this is actually the remake, or not the remake, but the port on, what was it for?
The Game Boy
Bobby?
Advance. Yeah,
Game Boy Advance. So they had the Link to the Past port, and I found this at a game store in Denver. So whenever Bobby feels like having me drop it off, which, he lives on the other side of the city, so I don't know if it's going to be anytime soon, but I just thought that this was really cool, and I was tempted to keep it, but Bobby loves Zelda way more than I do. So, and look, it even comes with the 4 Sword Adventures.
Nice.
That was the one where you could plug in the 4 Game Boy Advances into the GameCube, right? Yeah,
Yes.
I remember.
Well, that was the
That's
GameCube version, because that version, that was the one where you could connect the 4 Game Boy Advances to play with your friends, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then the GameCube version is the one where you could plug in your GBAs into the GameCube to play with your friends. So there's 2 different versions.
That came with Ocarina of Time, right? On the same disc?
No. Four Swords Adventure was its own GameCube game.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I'm thinking of something. I'm thinking of that one with the Master Quest, right?
Yeah.
Zelda's Collector Edition.
Yeah,
so,
that's what I'm thinking of.
Yeah, there are two of those because there was if you pre-ordered Wind Waker for the GameCube, you got that Master Quest edition of the Ocarina of Time. And then they released a special edition GameCube that came with a pack-in disc that included Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask, Zelda 1, and Zelda 2.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
that's right.
Did that 4-game one have the Master's Quest or no?
No, it was just the standard Ocarina version.
That's too bad.
Yeah, and I'm lucky. I got those.
I actually found it too. Yeah, I found it secondhand in Phoenix of all places.
I think it was a pre-order incentive for you said Wind Waker, right? It was
for the Master Quest, yes.
Yeah, I remember that's how I obtained it back when an EB Games employee didn't have to pay for the pre-order.
Oh,
wink,
nice.
Wink, wink.
Okay, so second question is, what makes Zelda stand out compared to other adventure games? And let's start with Bobby.
Oh man, it's both an easy and a tough question because there's so many things and it's hard to peg one thing. And then, like, if you go back to the beginning, especially with the original Zelda, I keep wanting to bring this up. So the original Zelda, released in Japan in '85, came out on the Famicom Disk System. If you remember, is on the diskette. So I don't know if they ever released a Nintendo cartridge version in Japan, but in America,
they did.
Okay, so in the States, we never got the disc system, so of course they had to figure out a way to give it a way to save, and that's where they came up with the backup battery. But anyway, I mean, just going back to that original Zelda, it wasn't necessarily the first game to be, I guess in a sense, open world where you could pretty much explore and you were undirected, but it was the one that had mass appeal, or that I guess most people had access to because of the popularity of Nintendo. And, at the time, since PC games were very limited, depending on the PC they were made for, some of the PCs may not have been available in your area, or PCs were more expensive. A Nintendo, on the other hand, was a relatively cheap computer to play games on. And so it definitely had a better market appeal. And but just the art style, the exploration, the high fantasy, which was really popular in the 80s thanks to things like Dungeons and Dragons and the types of movies around the time. All those things are what made Zelda appeal to the masses. Just the ability to explore, the ability to fight with swords, and the ability to use magic and defeat monsters. And it was really part of that high fantasy and exploration, which are really the things that they've maintained throughout the years. I mean, there have been criticisms that some Zeldas have become more hand-holding and a little more linear at times, but they still have that very strong sense of adventure and high fantasy. And because they've maintained that, plus they've pretty much they've made Link the silent protagonist for all the mainline games. Granted, in the CDI versions, he talks, and in the Friday morning or the Friday afternoon Super Mario versions, he talks
amazingly in the CDI version.
Yes, great voice actor.
That's the hero we all did not need but got anyways.
Hero we did not want, but
we deserved. I don't know. We probably deserved that hero for the brats we were.
2020 hero.
But I think maintaining the voiceless Link, so that way he was basically a what's the word? Oh man, I had the word on the tip of my tongue, but
we just talked about it with Dead Space.
Yeah, that. But basically, you were the character, right? You just was your avatar. There you go. Yes, thank you, Avatar. He was just an avatar for the player, and that's part of what they made the appeal, is that you can embed yourself in that game and in that world. I think the other thing that was really important was the lore. A lot of the lore was left vague enough where you could create your own concepts, which gave ownership to the player, while also having enough detail there to keep you digging for more. And that goes right into what Val was saying about they would spend hours just bombing everything or setting things on fire, hoping to find stuff because they want to learn more about the world.
Yeah. No, and that's one thing. I mean, we will definitely get into the lore itself in a later question, but with, you had Link, which connected all these games, so the name was very, very appropriate. And Zelda needing to be saved sometimes, and she had her other persona as Sheik, which I don't know what game she first came out with.
Ocarina of Time.
Oh, there you go.
That's the only game where she's had that.
Outing.
But I mean, like, I don't even really follow Legend of Zelda, but I know so much about the lore just because of how much Nintendo's really put into it, and even just in passing, you still kind of get a feel for it, and
it's a part of pop culture, man.
Yeah, exactly.
It really
actually,
is.
and I was when I recently watched Scott Pilgrim this year, and they have the and what's it called? And Edgar Wright, he asked Nintendo if he could incorporate it because he said it's so important to pop culture, and I was like, that's really cool, because most people our age would absolutely recognize it.
Yeah.
I still remember that you brought up the Scott Pilgrim, and there's that scene where Knives is on the couch when she first goes to watch him play, and she sits next to I always forget his name, young Neil, and is that his name? Anyway, the guy who hangs out.
I think you're right. Yeah,
but he doesn't play in the band, and she goes, "What do you play?" And he goes, "Oh, that's a tough question. I play Zelda, Tetris," and then he stops. He can't go on anymore. It's like. So, yep, definitely a pop culture icon. I think like they have the meme like Legend of Zelda, and then they put a picture of Link, right? But realistically, I mean, they put that meme because realistically, if you know what Zelda is, you know exactly who those characters are. Even if you've never played the game, you know who Link is, you know who Zelda is. I mean, maybe
what if Zelda was a girl?
Didn't they do that in the Hyrule Warriors game? Didn't they make like a female Zelda? It was like I'm serious. Like, was it Hyrule Warriors that came on the Switch or Wii U? I don't remember.
It came out on the Wii U, but you said didn't they make a female Zelda?
Oh, duh! You see, there you go. A female Link. There.
You know what? I have Hyrule Warriors on the Wii U, but I never played it all the way through.
Hey, that new one though looks amazing. Like
it does look cool.
Is that
I'm still looking forward to playing that.
That
looks
the Breath of the Wild one, right?
Yeah,
yes.
It's the prequel, the Age of Calamity, I think.
Age of Calamity, yeah.
Yeah. Oh man, I'm so excited for that.
Yeah, everyone's
really
losing
cool.
their shit over a young Impa. Like, oh my god, she's so amazing.
So, let's go ahead and move on to Aldo.
Okay, this is
The same question.
second question, right?
Yeah,
same question.
Mm-hmm. So, what makes it stand out compared to other adventure games?
It was when at the time it came out. So all the other adventure games, I think it kind of to add to what Bobby said, all the other adventure games compared to it kind of looked like archaic, in a sense. They specifically like on the PC, and a lot of like again like I mean a lot of people didn't have access to PC in the late 80s. They were expensive.
Mm-hmm.
They were expensive as hell, and adventure, I think like probably the biggest series of adventure games I think it would be considered adventure would be like Ultima at the time on the PC, and those were not accessible towards like any like casual gamers at all. Those were extremely confusing, complicated, like rules based adventure games, and then it's when Zelda came out, it made it it was accessible to anyone,
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't a secret to everybody, and it was
my
God. Sorry, okay,
don't
It was good. It was good.
Yeah.
Okay. But yeah, I mean, like it was so accessible, like, and immediately you could jump in and just start exploring and explore how you wanted to explore.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't have to like abide by like certain rules, go on a certain path, and that's what really made it stand out for its time. And it was that it allowed like such this big open world, but was also accessible. You know, it wasn't complicated. And that's at that time that's what made that one stand out. And then like guess like later on, more modern would like have been like Ocarina of Time. I think Ocarina of Time like reinvented the 3D adventure game by the time it came out. It was I can't think of anything else like it. That was like an adventure game that was like full 3D like that.
Let's see, on the PS1. I mean,
PS1
because Ocarina was 97 or 98.
96, isn't it?
It was 90. No,
oh wait, 98. Yeah, 96 was the release of the N64.
Yeah. So, I'm trying to think because a lot of RPGs, which would I guess be like the closest comparison, you know, is like Final Fantasy VII, but that's not even really comparable because that's, you know, way more
different genre of game, really.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think maybe the closest was like that I can think of were the Tomb Raider games, but even those, the motion and the movement was very limited. I mean, you know, the fighting was probably the quickest mechanic, and it was still kind of clunky. And then when you explore, you know, if you needed Laura Croft to shuffle, she would shuffle, pause for 2 seconds, shuffle again. You know, it was really slow and archaic. And while Ocarina of Time was so smooth, it was butter smooth to play.
There was nothing like it at the time. I'm thinking about it, like even like on PC. And at that time, in the late 90s, I was an avid PC gamer at that time, like very much so. And I'm trying to think really hard, and like there's really not much that comes to mind or anything.
Yeah,
I think it's like from like even 2D into the 3D world, it was a trendsetter. I mean, the Zelda games are like a trendsetter. Like whatever next dimension is coming up, I'm sure Zelda's gonna do the same with that too. I can't imagine what it would be, but it's a trendsetter. I think that's what makes it.
And Nintendo's really good about both creating things and then taking things that people have started with and massively improving them. And that's essentially what Zelda has been. Mario and Zelda have been the two games where they explore different concepts and then take existing concepts and massively improve on them. I think they kind of lulled on there with like Wind Waker is such a beautiful game, but as far as gameplay, it's not that distinctly different from predecessors, right? Pretty much Ocarina of Time set the stage, and then the games pretty much all through really through Twilight Princess followed that same mold, and then Skyward Sword tried to break it. Unfortunately, people didn't buy into it, and then they had to figure out something else, and that's why they came up with Breath of the Wild, which in a way is revisiting their old roots.
Yeah.
It's going back, yeah.
I mean, the only thing I can think before that would be what Mario 64, because it was a launch title, right? That was your introduction to to 3D gaming, and Ocarina of Time.
At that.
What's that?
It was an amazing introduction at that,
and it was. But Ocarina of Time just makes it so much more. It just perfects that formula so much more than Mario does.
Yeah, that lock-on system that they created for that game is so important.
Yeah, actually, when I first played it, that was one of the things I was most surprised by. I was like, wow, for one of the earliest 3D games, like the controls are so perfect. Like I have no problem controlling this game at all whatsoever.
Yeah, that and I mean, if I can't imagine playing it on any other controller either. The Ocarina of Time.
Well, I played through it with the Wii Classic controller because it's on the Virtual Console. It plays great, but I could imagine probably the original controller was a better experience.
Yeah,
I personally think it was. I mean, a lot of people like bash on that controller. Well, I mean, it was unreliable. That analog stick was unreliable. It was poorly designed. But the games that Nintendo made that were specifically designed for that controller, there's a reason why they made that controller.
Yeah,
and it really worked.
Yeah, you know, I don't really agree with a lot of the hate for that Nintendo 64
Same
controller.
here. I don't agree with it.
I
either.
mean, with the D-pad and also with the analog stick, like I never felt uncomfortable at all. Like to me, it was just it was definitely different compared to everything they had done before. But I never really struggled with it, and I wouldn't necessarily say it was because I was just perfect gamer or whatever. I just didn't see a lot of the issues that other people had. I think most of the complaints probably come from people who have played modern games, modern systems, and then go back. Because,
Yeah.
even going back now, I can still play like GoldenEye and Perfect Dark relatively easily, even though there's not dual analog sticks and you have to aim by holding the R button and stuff like that. I did get an updated 64 controller though that is more modern. It's actually set up like a.
Oh wow.
Let me show you.
Cool.
Yeah, I remember when you showed me the. I think you were doing a pre-order, or those like Kickstarter or something like that for it. But it looked really cool.
Yeah, so it's this one. It's called the Retro Baller, and so yeah, it's got the analog stick over here.
Bala.
And I actually like it because it's got the L and R, but then 2 Z buttons, so you can make your choice for that. But
That's cool.
this is pretty good. I like it.
She looked thick.
It's actually really light too.
Before we had the pandemic happen, Frank let me use it. We were playing Castlevania of all games on the N64. Like Frank and I are probably the only two people in the world in that game who've actually beat it and enjoy it. And it's a shitty to control game, but using that controller, using that controller, it plays really good. Well, I mean, as good as it could play. So that's a really good controller.
Mm-hmm. So Val, let's go ahead and ask you what do you think it makes it stand out?
I mean, the guys already said it. The thrill of the exploration. I mentioned it earlier about discovering those hidden doors behind the wall that you bomb or the bush that you burn. When I used to work at this print shop, and this guy I used to work with would ask me about games, and he would ask me, "Have you ever played an RPG before?" Because he was talking about RPGs. And I asked him, "Well, does Zelda count?" And he said no. But to me, Zelda, like the Zelda games, are kind of they're RPG games, but they're less. They're more approachable, I guess, to casual gamers, right? They're not.
Yeah.
They're not grindy like RPG games. Like with RPGs, you have to worry about. Yeah, you have to worry about leveling up. And how do you level up? Well, you have to grind, and grinding being you kill a bunch of crap that you have to do over and over again. To get where you need to be. There's nothing like that in Zelda. It's very it's a more casual experience, I guess. It's more approachable to more people. But the storylines. Is that whiskey?
Yeah, she's fucking with my little Star Wars figures. She's about to fuck with them. Standing on top of my old computer.
No, but like the storylines in Zelda are always like this labor of love. They're always great, even when they're minimal. Even the very original, the very first Zelda game, so simple, but just I remember being like captivated by it as a kid, no matter how simple it was. But that and I don't know, just the quality of the gameplay. They're always trying something different. There's always something new in a Zelda game, and it's just there's always something to look forward to. I don't know. I don't know how else to explain it, but
no, that makes sense. And and I think actually that's you kind of hit on what I think makes it stand out compared to a lot of other adventure games. Is I mean, one, it's such a long series, but to have that many great games in a franchise, where you're like batting over 400, almost 1,000 on every game. That's just a testament to make it stand out. How many other franchises can you think of that even have 5+ games where 90% of the games are like great, not just good but great?
Well, and also how many franchises can you think of where the games, the story of the game is pretty much the same for every single game, right?
But you're always different.
Right, you're always having to save Zelda from Ganon. That's pretty much always the storyline for the most part, right? With the exception of a few. But it never gets old, right? Because it's not about the story they're telling; it's how they tell it, and it's always just this amazing experience and always new and different.
Yeah, I'd say, and one of the only other games or franchises I can think of that does that is Mario, but that's also a Nintendo property, so that's kind of cheating.
Yeah, I see a common denominator here.
No, yeah, and like I said, that's why I love it as an idea, even though I'm not a huge fan of the games, is that it's just so cool. And I remember when they announced Breath of the Wild and just even reading up on it and seeing how big the map was going to be, I was like, wow, that looks really, really cool. And I mean, I think that's one of the highest rated Zelda games too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
A lot of people have gripes with it, but it's still really good. I mean, to be like have gripes with the game, but like still be amazing. That says a lot about it.
Yeah, exactly.
And my gripe with it is that it's so big that I don't think I've ever finished any of it. Like, it's actually kind of cool is that I've actually finished the game, but I've probably done less than half of what you can probably do in the game.
Yeah.
Very nice.
Like collecting those korok seeds.
Korok seeds.
Yeah.
The little tiny
like
poos.
collecting all the. Yeah, like apparently there's like 900 plus something of them in like total.
Yeah, there's
and
900.
You just get a golden poo, right? Like,
yeah.
Yep.
And even Link is like, this doesn't smell too good.
That's exactly what it says.
Yeah. So we've talked a lot about the story and the graphics, but now let's move on to the next question, which I think we can all agree upon is the amazing musical compositions, like that, those soundtracks, the way they're implemented in the games are just so well done. I mean, to me, I still really think of the NES, like just the original theme, and then Link to the Past. But I know that with all the games that, especially the ones that you guys have played, that we've reached some games where you're like, wow, this soundtrack is just so well implemented that it just has an even greater impact on the story. So my question to you all, and I'm going to start with Val with this, is what soundtrack is the strongest in the series? So not necessarily your favorite, but you think is actually the best implemented in a game.
Wow, that's a really tough question. So, I mean, just to go back to what you said, the original Legend of Zelda game basically has 2 tracks, right? Besides the intro and the ending theme, the ending thing, you have the overworld and you have the dungeon theme, and that's it.
And the last dungeon also. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, sorry.
The last dungeon. Yeah.
That's right. It has a different theme.
Yeah. So 3 technically, but you never ever get tired of those tracks, right? Because they're so good, and you would think a game with 2 or 3 tracks, you would just get tired of it, and you really don't. So it's a testament to how good those songs are. But oh man, the best. I might have to say Ocarina of Time, just because I was impressed by how good music out of a cartridge could sound, right? Because you hear the overworld with the little violins playing, and I was thinking, wow, that sounds really amazing for a cartridge. And just I don't know, I thought that soundtrack was just beautiful. So I'd probably go with that one.
Nice. Would you say that's your favorite though?
I think I think I might say that's my favorite. Yeah. I'm actually I'm having a problem remembering the Ocarina of Time, or I'm sorry, the Breath of the Wild music, because a lot of it there's really not that much of it. When you're exploring, most of the game it's pretty silent for the most part. But yeah, I think I might go with Ocarina of Time for that one. I think that soundtrack is just gorgeous.
Nice. I can't really think of too many tracks off of it. I'd have to go back and listen to it. How about you, Bobby.
So to me, every Zelda game since Link to the Past owes its music back to Link to the Past. Some of the most important music is still played in The Legend of Zelda comes from Link to the Past games. And then every game since then has then added additional tracks to it. Like probably my personal favorite track of all time is the Gerudo Valley track from Ocarina of Time. Because it has that, like, I guess merengue style with the guitar in the background. It's beautiful.
How does it sound? Can you give us just a little taste?
Dun, 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 dun. I can see it's going to sound terrible. Let's not do that.
That's exactly how it sounds.
That's exactly how it sounds.
I was liking it.
It's just, it has the horn start, goes da 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 dun 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 da 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 dun. See, it sounds terrible coming from my mouth, right? But it's like when you put it all together.
It's a pretty mouth.
It's a pretty mouth.
Yeah. Doesn't sound terrible at all.
This is why we have Aldo on the show.
Look at.
And it's such a beautiful piece of music because it's very high paced and it's got a nice mix of melodies. And that's one of the other strong points of Legend of Zelda is they don't limit themselves to one style. Like Koji Kondo, right? I mean, Bolero Fire was the song he wanted to use as the intro for Legend of Zelda, the original game. And they didn't have the license for it. So in one night, he came up with the intro Zelda theme. Like just in one night. And that theme has stuck. Like you can listen to any orchestral rendition of that song and you'll probably still want to go back and listen to the 8-bit version because that's how good it is. That 8-bit version is amazing.
For my money, like nothing beats that sound of like just the old NES, like on an old like tube television, that little mono speaker.
Yeah.
Just that hum and hiss that it makes when that first note hits of that song. Nothing beats that.
It is incredible.
It's the coolest sound of all time. I fucking love that.
But I think what also makes a lot of the Zelda music work is how it's limited because I think up until Wind Waker, up until Twilight Princess, Ryan confirmed it for me. Up until Twilight Princess, every Zelda game had music that was made through MIDI. They never used orchestras. The first time they used orchestra in a game was Skyward Sword. And Skyward Sword has really good music. Like the only song I really have in my mind is the main theme for it's called, I think I was going to say it's called Zelda's Lullaby, but I don't think that's wrong. I don't think that's right. And maybe like the Song of the Goddess, but it was the main theme and that's why. It's the main theme, but it's a rewind of Zelda's Lullaby from Ocarina of Time. So it's played backwards. And no, I'm not going to try this time. We'll have Mike add it in post. So I'll just start going, and then Mike just add the music, and we'll say that's what's coming out of my mouth. So go ahead, Frank.
No, go ahead. I was just going to say, it kind of reminds me of our conversation when it came to Castlevania, how just those original tracks, they get adapted because they're just so good.
Yeah.
And, and the same is definitely true with Zelda. Like Aldo was saying, like the NES and the SNES, just that those melodies, they transitioned so well because the bass music is awesome. And then of course, when they do like the video games live and they add, strings and they add the pause and all that stuff, it's just really, really cool because it just builds around like almost perfect music as it is.
Yeah, and I mean, and then the music consistent. I mean, it's like Ocarina of Time. You hear the music of Lon Lon Ranch, and any other game that has a ranch, hey, it's Lon Lon Ranch. They play the exact same music, just using a different melody type or a different score type. I mean, and because it works, the music is so good. Kakariko Village, no matter which Kakariko Village you visit, it's almost always the same theme for that village. And it's just because one, Nintendo and the developers are showing you that, look, the connections are there. Even though we're not deliberately saying this takes place at this time. Well, we're going to talk more about that in a little bit, but they're showing that, look, these things are still connected and they still carry over. And but I think Val's right in giving credit definitely to Ocarina of Time because a lot of the music comes from there too. But really, when Koji Kondo was kind of unleashed on Link to the Past, he had an opportunity there to make tons of music for different areas, and he took advantage. And I mean, we're talking about a guy who's, instrumental in developing this music and including various instruments in different. Sorry, I couldn't resist. Well, I expected Val to react the worst, and he was just like, moving on. So, I mean,
off guard, man.
It's incredible. But yeah, Skyward Sword was the first one to have an orchestral track, and then Breath of the Wild, as far as I know, also has an orchestral track. And those are beautiful, but there's something about the limits of MIDI design and music that makes those originals they're going to stand the test of time.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, so I guess my favorite track is actually Twilight Princess. I think it has the right balance of the traditional Zelda music, but it also has a lot more darker themes that you don't traditionally hear in the Zelda games. Wind Waker has some really good music when you face Ganon, especially in that final climactic battle. I can't remember the title of it at this point in time, but there's a lot of themes that are like that in Twilight Princess, just because of how dire and dark the alternate world is. So when you become a wolf, I forget what they call it, Twilight World. So I mean, that's probably my favorite soundtrack out of the series.
Wow, very nice, very nice. How about you, Aldo?
My favorite out of the series might be like with Val would be Ocarina of Time, simply because it's just so memorable, and like a lot of like the modern Zeldas, a lot of the music, I mean, it's still carried on from that game also. Is it the Lost Wood is probably like my favorite track in the whole game.
Oh,
like,
yeah,
I
yeah.
just every time I hear it, I just keep I keep whistling that over and over for like days straight. It just does not leave me alone, And it's just like, so it's just simply because of how memorable the tracks are. Definitely Ocarina of Time.
Nice. Did you want to add anything to that, or?
I mean, not really. I mean, like it's I don't. I appreciate music in a game. It's very important, but it depends on the game, obviously.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's that's all I can say is like it's Ocarina of Time because of the memorable tracks. And
and also because you're. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. I wasn't
I was
continuing.
going to say because you're participating with that music too, right? Because the ocarina, that's how you.
Oh yeah, you got to play the.
Yeah, you control time and you control elements.
That's why it's so memorable, I guess.
Yeah, and those tracks. I mean, the tracks you have to learn how to play are just gorgeous, and they just don't leave your memory at all as you play the game and afterwards.
Yeah, and I think for the average person, like video game music doesn't really stand out, but as I've gotten older, and like our friend Gino, he's very much about video game soundtracks, and and I did love video game music when I was a kid, but not to the level that I do now, and especially really consciously listening to it and just focusing on it, especially like the way that it's implemented, especially with like battles, because the Wind Waker track that you're talking about, Bobby, I remember it's just like, wow, it's so well done and it's so appropriate for that battle.
That's an amazing track. Yes,
exactly. And I think I just kind of falling back to Link to the Past, I think that's my favorite. Would I say it's the strongest in the series? I honestly I haven't played enough, and that's on me, but those tracks really stick out to me because they're the most familiar. So I would say, for what I've experienced, those are the best implemented.
I do want to point out that the music for a game is good when the company actually puts on a full orchestra to perform live for people. Ryan reminded me that they had the Legend of Zelda Symphony of the Goddess tour, and it traveled from January of 2012 to December of 2017. So almost 6 years they toured around the world.
Wow.
I know my brother-in-law and sister got to see it live in San Antonio. One of the posters I have for Legend of Zelda for that tour is based on the Majora's Mask one. Oh, such a beautiful poster. Actually, I should probably dig it out and show it to you guys. Yeah.
Yeah, you should put that up somewhere.
I should have put it behind me. I should have taken down the Super Metroid.
It's a Metroid.
Smetroid?
Metroid.
Smutroid. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. It's just I was gonna ask Bobby, but do you guys know if they ever released like a box set
On the other side.
the music?
If they were,
I've never seen
A box set for like the music, because there was like a Castlevania box set.
I'm surprised they haven't.
Oh, that's cool.
If they haven't.
I've never seen one. I have personally. I only have one from the Zelda series. Is the Majora's Mask soundtrack,
Mm-hmm.
and I think I got that. They sent that to me back when they had that Club Nintendo on the.
Mm.
Yeah, and they just sent it to me. I don't know why, but they sent it to me as like when the 3D version came out on the 3DS. Well, the 3D version, the updated 3D version came out on the 3DS.
Oh yeah, I remember.
They sent that to me.
Awesome.
That's real cool, man. Oh wow,
Yeah, that looks cool.
Man,
it's got like everyone in there. That's so cool.
and video game art, man. Another thing that's, you know what? Sadly, it's really fallen by the wayside. Minus, a few companies, but
Mhm.
I always think of modern video game cover art. It's just so bland, at least here in the States, because usually Japan still gets like really nice stuff, and even Europe will get some really cool alternative covers. But if I see like one more game where it's like a dude just standing there with a gun, or or it's just like a person's face, it's like right here. It's like the creativity. Like I just want to ask like the creative cover and just be like, you hate your life, don't you? I mean, because it's a corporate decision. You know that they're just like, no, I don't like it. Just put Nathan Drake on there. It's like
He's handsome.
I miss that old Nintendo and Super Nintendo like box art, and even old PC games, the fat boxes and stuff like that, where maybe it wasn't even representative of the game, but you just did a really good job of making you wonder, oh wow, that looks so cool. And but minimalist can work. Like I think of like the gold cover. Was it Ocarina of Time? Had the gold cover?
Well, it had the gold cartridge.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, the gold cartridge.
The box also had like a plastic like laminate.
Yeah.
Like had like a plastic laminate on the front of the box, and it was like kind of like gold underneath. It was shiny. That's it. Yeah.
But I mean, we can save another podcast for video game art another day. But because we had already brought this up, and this is one of the questions I do want to go in depth with, because I'm not too familiar with the Zelda timeline, but Nintendo officially came out with the Hyrule Historia, which established, for the most part, every game in the different timelines or in the different universes and everything like that. So,
not including Breath of the Wild.
Not including Breath of the Wild, even though isn't that like 1,000 years in the future or something?
There's still a lot of debate.
Yeah. So,
wasn't that game supposed to be about aliens at one point also?
It
really was.
True?
I remember it really was. I remember like reading something like they were experimenting with the idea of like aliens in the Zelda Hyrule world, and
I'm really
because the what are they called, the Guardians were originally supposed to be like some kind of aliens, crystal skulls. No, I do remember hearing something like that. I don't know if it was rumor or if it was fact though. So, but I remember hearing something like that. Like those Guardians weren't originally machines; they're supposed to be like some kind of alien invaders.
So then I'm gonna start with Bobby, because I feel like he'd probably be the first and foremost expert out of the four of us. But like as far as the timeline goes, like could you just kind of give us a little bit of information for it and then give us your thoughts?
Jeez, to be honest, I'm sorry you picked me as your expert in this, because the Zelda timeline is one of the things that I kind of ignore. It's like generally,
I think most people,
like, I don't know the details of what games are in there, but generally speaking, the games, of course, are not in order of the way, like the chronological order is not the same as the order of the release, right? Like Zelda 1 comes in one of the alternate timelines. So the focus of the timeline comes from, of course, from Ocarina of Time. And, there's certain games that are in the main line that start off the whole series. And I can't remember how many games it is and which games there are, to be honest. But you have Ocarina of Time, and then you have 3 options. Link wins. Link goes back as a child. So you have a Link wins, and there's the adult Link, right? And then you have the Link as a child, as if he never went to the future. And then you have if Link dies. And then that's where all the dark stuff happens. So they kind of define that based on the version of Ganon that comes about. It's like when Link dies, you have the full-fledged Ganondorf. Like, he's reached his full power. So, like, I think Link to the Past falls into that timeline because he's at his full power. Because in Link to the Past, he's just Ganondorf. He's not, Ganon. Like, if you remember in Ocarina of Time, his Ganon form is, he's the skinny guy with the green face and the long nose. And then when you think you defeat him and the castle collapses, well, he becomes Ganondorf, right? The pig-like being. And that's
it was just Ganon. I thought Ganon was the.
You're right. I reversed it. Ganondorf is the weaker version, and Ganon is the main version. You're right. I mixed it up. So Ganon is the main villain in Link to the Past, so he's had his full form. So supposedly that's in the Death Timeline. But in other games where you face just Ganon, that's supposedly where the child timeline took over. And so like in was it Twilight Princess? I think Twilight Princess falls under that one. And then you have the one where Link wins and Ganon is essentially banished. So then those games, I don't remember they have Ganon come back, but a lot of those games include villains that are not Ganon, like Vati or other villains that come about because now Ganon has vacated the area. That's how I remember it. I'm sure someone who really keeps key of it is probably going to tell me that I'm wrong. I'm sure in the comments they're going to tell me I'm wrong. But I know the whole core is it focuses on the split timeline with Ocarina of Time. So my take on the Zelda timeline is I don't dislike it, but I don't adhere to it because to me, the beautiful thing about Zelda, and we were just talking about this, is how vague, how the lore is vague enough for you to interpret it in a way that you can create your own story out of it, while also leaving you breadcrumbs about what could have been. Like, you can play Ocarina of Time, see that there's a castle, a Temple of Time, play Breath of the Wild and go, holy shit, here's a Temple of Time. Or you play Skyward Sword and, it's the Goddess Temple, and you play Breath of the Wild. Holy shit, there's the Goddess Temple. Or you play Wind Waker and in Skyward Sword, in Skyward Sword, there's some sort of reference to the future possibility of Wind Waker. So, I mean, there's all these kinds of connections that you can create. And I think in a way, by fans demanding the Zelda timeline, they took away some of the power that they had to create their own version of the Zelda universe. To me, I never thought the Zelda games were sequels to one another, with few exceptions like Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask or Wind Waker and Phantom Hourglass. They were ultimately retelling the same story in different ways. And if they took place in the same universe, we're talking about, that universe died and was reborn and the cycle begins anew. I mean, to me, that makes more sense rather than trying to force these connections, because to me they do seem forced, where you can put them in any way. But that's my take.
Yeah. Well, one thing I heard, and it's a very passing kind of comment, but one interpretation from a fan was that all these stories, that they're so different because they're just retellings by an unreliable narrator about this hero. And that's why he's called Link, because he's the only thing that's really connecting all these stories. Yeah. And I like that idea. You know what I mean? Like that's a pretty cool. It definitely adds more of the fantasy, like mythos kind of surrounding the franchise. And yeah, like the Hyrule Historia, looking through it, it's a lot. It's actually a pretty thick book. And when you're trying to read through it, if you're not very familiar with a lot of the games, it kind of gets, you kind of get lost in the muck.
Oh yeah, that Historia is definitely for people who know the games in and out like we do. So Ryan did send me except for you, but you can still appreciate it. Ryan did send me the actual timeline. Would you like for me to go over it?
Please.
It's pretty crazy.
Hold on, I let's go over it after Aldo and Val give their input. So I'm going to start with Val. Val.
I don't know the official story line or what Nintendo is decreed as the official timeline. I don't care. Like Bobby mentioned, to me, the games reinvent themselves every time they're created. Right? It's like I mentioned earlier. It seems to be the same storyline. It's just told a different way. So to me, it doesn't really matter which game is first and which game is canon, which one's not, and which universe falls into what. Because to me, they're all completely different and they're all independent of each other, with the exception of certain sequels. But yeah, I don't really have much to say about the official timeline.
How about you, Aldo?
Yeah, I just thought the timeline that the Hyrule Historia was basically created to like meet demand. You know, I mean, because like for me, like I guess like we could all agree that the timeline is really not important to us, or a timeline is not important to us.
Mm-hmm.
But there's people out there that theorized over a timeline for like since the first game was released, you know, and like to this day. And I think Nintendo like released something to like to appease those people, but then they got backlash from it because like it's completely off than what they theorized for all these years, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
But like to build on what like Frank, what one of your friends said, that's a fan of the series. It's kind of like, yeah, I mean, it's kind of like a story that's told by different people over the centuries, you know. It's an unwritten story that's told by different people. It's like kind of like when you tell one person one thing, and it goes all the way around the room till it gets back to you. And it's a completely different story. You
Telephone.
know, that's basically what the story of the Legend of Zelda's games are. It's basically a story that started off. From what I saw, I don't know if you're looking at the same timeline that Ryan sent you, Bobby. But does it start off at Skyward Sword?
Yes.
Yeah, it's like basically it starts from there, and then over the years, the next person told the story like this, and then the person after them told it like this, and it just till it got all the way back to Skyward Sword again, and it was something completely different. It became Breath of the Wild.
I mean, like you said, it's an oral history, right? And as it passes on, the oral history changes.
Yeah,
I think that's a very beautiful way to describe it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean it exactly. It's like how a lot of like old Greek mythology stories were told. You know, a lot of them weren't written. They got written at some point, but like before that, who knows what they were originally? You know,
right?
Like, and we would never know.
Like the Bible,
but yeah. I don't know who like I forgot. I saw a not Mythbusters. I saw Pawn Stars of like I guess like that Gutenberg Bible
Mm-hmm.
that some guy brought in a page of. Pretty fascinating. That's a whole different podcast.
Wait, Steve Gutenberg has. Oh,
Yeah.
Val was making the same joke.
And that's the only Bible I would follow. It's a Steve Gutenberg Bible. The Police Academy Bible. That's my Bible right there.
I was thinking Short Circuit, but yeah.
I was thinking High Spirits. But I think I'm the only one who thinks of that movie.
Circuit.
I like High Spirits, but that's a whole nother podcast.
So what is the official timeline according to Nintendo?
So these are pictures taken right out of the Hyrule Historia, which, by the way, if you guys don't have a copy of, I recommend it. It's got amazing stuff in there, just for the Zelda fan.
Didn't I give you that copy? Or
yeah, you gave me the hard copy, and then my daughter bought me the soft copy, the paperback. So yeah, I got 2 copies of it. Actually, the one that you gave me is still sealed, because after she got me that, I was like, man, I don't want to open this one now.
Yeah, I don't blame you.
All right, so it starts with Skyward Sword, which from the beginning, Nintendo made it clear Skyward Sword was about the start of Hyrule. Hyrule doesn't exist. There's no Master Sword. So this is where all that comes from. There's no Ganon. The main villain in there is named Demise. He's been trapped for 1,000 years. And spoiler alert, when you defeat Demise, he says his wrath will always come back, and it takes on the form of Ganon in the futures. The next game is Minish Cap. Then you have Four Swords. So any of the Four Swords games takes place there, I think. Then you have Ocarina of Time. So the hero... Does that say the hero fails? Or the hero... Oh yeah, this is the decline of Hyrule. So this is where the hero loses. So then you have Link to the Past. Then you have Oracle of Ages and Oracle of Seasons. Link's Awakening. The Legend of Zelda, the original. And then The Adventure of Link, Zelda 2. So that's in the Hyrule Fails timeline. When the hero's triumphant, it goes to Majora's Mask. Then Twilight Princess. And that looks like one of the later Four Swords Adventures games. Let me see if there's a more clear image of that. Okay, so it's just those three.
That's a dark history for being triumphant.
Right? And then the Hero of Winds and a New World. This is when Ganondorf is sealed. So I guess he's not like defeated, he's just sealed away. You got Wind Waker, The Phantom Hourglass, and Spirit Tracks. So 2 out of those 3 games you don't need to play. So that's what it is. That's what they got here.
When Ganon is sealed away, it's the series is useless. Minus Wind Waker.
But that explains why Ganon, looks like Ganondorf in Wind Waker, right? He doesn't look like there's no Ganon version. So I don't know.
And you said Breath of the Wild is completely separate from...
I totally heard Breath of the Wild.
Shut up.
So it's not that it's separate. It's just that it's not... Nintendo hasn't officially announced where it fits in the timeline. And I'm fine with that. I mean, the thing is, Breath of the Wild seems to have everything from all the Zelda games. It references all kinds of things. So that's why it makes sense where it probably just takes place so far into the future that, now Nintendo doesn't have to hold themselves to a timeline anymore, which I think is good. I don't think they need to hold themselves to any sort of timeline. And like Aldo said, they waited so long that by the time they released it, no matter what they released, fans weren't going to be happy. There's going to be some sect of fans that were just going to be like, "Oh, this is stupid. That doesn't make any sense." But that wasn't the point of Zelda. If that's what you're griping over about Zelda, you're completely missing the point of the games. And so hopefully no one who's watching this video is going to gripe over that. And if you do, well, then I'm sorry. But we love the games for what they are. Yeah.
All right. So this kind of leads up to our last question. So we're going to kind of wrap it up. If you could
advice.
If you could take like elements from your favorite Zelda games and make like a super Zelda game, what would you take from which games, and what would you call your game?
I never thought of the name.
I know. I just decided to add that because.
Okay. I was gonna say.
It's because and we talked about it during the Castlevania podcast. Is that like the subtitle? It should be really good, and Zelda's done a pretty good job as far as making itself stand out. We don't have like Revenge or Rising, and it's got more clever stuff. Phantom Hourglass, Spirit Tracks, stuff like that. So I'm going to start with Aldo on this one.
Definitely what I would take is definitely the world of Breath of the Wild, first and foremost. I'd probably have like the amount of dungeons that Link to the Past has, for sure. Well, especially for the Breath of the Wild world, because like there's technically no dungeons. There's just like all those little temples and those big walkie and flying thingies, But I definitely take those 2 elements. Also like I take like an alternate world like Link to the Past and Wind Waker. Wind Waker had that other like that little alternate like sub under the water world, whatever it was. I forgot what it
Mhm.
was. But I would definitely take those three elements and put those together, and that would make the perfect Zelda game to me.
Mm-hmm.
As for a name, though, I mean, because can't just do that on us. I don't know. I would have to think about that. I mean, because you're like what you said, it would have to be something that's like what Zelda's known for. They do pick good subtitles for the subtitles for their games.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm. That's
Well,
tough.
think
But
about it, and I can get back to you.
okay.
How about you, Val?
I don't. I actually was trying to think of a good answer for this. I actually couldn't think of one. I think what Aldo hit on with Breath of the Wild's the size of the world would probably be something I have to add to that. I like the idea of a game that even when you think you're done with it, you're not. Right? You can always go back and do something else with it. It's so open that you feel like you're never finished with it, and it's completely optional to you to do that. So I like that, and it kind of harkens to the exploration that I felt with the original one as a kid, where it felt like you were never out of things to find and things to explore. Yeah, I don't know. It's tough. I might even say Breath of the Wild is already there, but yeah, I don't know. I don't have a good answer for that at the moment.
How about you, Bobby?
Yeah, if you had asked me before Breath of the Wild, I probably would have said to do Breath of the Wild. I really do think Nintendo really hit the head on the nail with that one. The only things I would probably add to that one is, probably some actual full-on dungeons as opposed to the temples. Like, I don't have a problem with those. I really do think that's the only thing that was missing. And they could have those shrines, throughout the game. Maybe less of them. I mean, hell, have the same amount and add 4 dungeons that are worthy. I mean, I love Majora's Mask. I mean, Majora's Mask is probably my second favorite Zelda game, but it only has 4 main dungeons. 5 because you have to get to the final boss. But then that's it. There's not, 8 dungeons in the game like in Ocarina of Time. There's not 12 of them like there are in Link to the Past. I mean, there's overkill with the dungeons in some of these games. Like some of the weakest dungeons people talk about are in Twilight Princess, but I think what you have a chance with the Breath of Wild is you have a chance to balance all that out, the exploration with the dungeon crawling that we love. And I mean, they can even be more what's the word I'm looking for? Or I guess less directed with the dungeons, where the dungeons aren't so much this location where you have to find this one item, but the dungeons are there to explore in order to find items that you may or may not need. I mean, there's tons of different ways you can do it as far as with the dungeons. You don't necessarily have to do in the traditional sense where there's this final boss at the end of the dungeon where you get this one particular weapon. Or maybe you have a couple dungeons like that and a few more that are just for the purpose of exploration and, gaining items that, again, that you don't need, maybe gaining more hearts, whatever the case may be. Kind of like where, they have the challenge areas where you fall into a hole and you go through the different levels fighting enemies. But they can do that more of a dungeon style as opposed to just, going through different levels. Maybe, honestly, I can't think of anything else. I mean, one of the things I wouldn't take away from Breath of the Wild that people complain about is the breaking weapons. I actually really like that. I think the breaking weapons. I think they need to make certain weapons. At first, though. It was tough, but I think that's what I loved about it because it was challenging early on, and I think we've gone so used to Zelda games being easy to start off with, like they gradually build up, and I think this one was a good smack in the face. It forced you to have to think out of the box, right? And but I think the degradation on some of those weapons is a little too quick. But at the same time, if you earn enough of the poos, you can expand your inventory and carry as many, a bunch of weapons that you're never going to use anyway. So, I mean, I really do like the system. It has some minor improvements, but really the dungeons are the things I would add. But the one thing I've always thought would be neat for a Legend of Zelda game, since they do occasionally do like these side Zelda games like the Link's Crossbow Training or like the Hyrule Warriors, is I would like to see a Zelda game from the perspective of someone trying to resurrect Ganon. You know, like I think it'd be great with Breath of the Wild because you could do a prequel game that takes place 100 years before, or you're playing this character who's, you know, sneaking around, who's trying to figure out how to get Ganon to come back, you know, trying to get the right materials, trying to invade themselves in the politics of Hyrule. I mean, maybe I'm getting a little too in depth with the game because obviously they don't deal with politics and stuff like that really in these games. But the point is that it could definitely be another perspective. And I think it would be interesting because now you can talk about lore from the other side. We always focus on the aspect of Hyrule lore and how they stop Ganon, but how about the aspect about, you know, why are there people who want to bring Ganon back if all he does is cause harm? What's the benefit to them? You know, so they could explore a story like that and give us a person who's more of an enemy. The only thing that's going to be hard for Nintendo to do is, you know, how do they make this person an enemy without making the game overly violent and having him kill everybody left and right, you know? I mean, we can get away with that as Link because we're killing monsters, but in this case, they'd be taking out, you know, Hyruleans probably, right? So how do you deal with that aspect? So I know there's a lot of roadblocks, something like that, but...
You could probably, I mean, how is Ganon like resurrected or Ganondorf, whatever? Because I guess maybe like this person could like steal like life essence to like feed into, you know, building up all this power.
In Breath of the Wild, the Ganon, so he's more of a force rather than a character. He's just he's sealed away. And there's real no explanations to how he was sealed away, except they used some of those machines to do it. And so over time, he's seeped out into the world, and he's been able to take over those machines. And so 100 years in the past from when you play the game is when he escapes, and he's able to come out. And Zelda's able to seal him away temporarily, and Link gets injured in the process trying to protect her. So that's why he's, you know, put in some kind of like hibernation container so he can heal. And when he comes back 100 years later, the spell's starting to finally wear off and Ganon's going to be completely free. But there's no explanation as to how he even came to be sealed in the first place. It's just he's sealed and now he's escaping. So, I mean, that's what I'm saying. If they could then fill out that story and give us some background onto that, I think that would be interesting.
Fair enough.
Now, what you would title it, I don't know, Ganon Rising? Oh.
You're fired.
Yeah, I probably would be from that one.
No, I actually, I remember Bobby and I were talking about the game right when I was playing it the first time. And I was talking to him about how much I hated
the breakable weapons.
Yeah, that your weapons broke eventually. And I was like, this sucks. I'm like, and he told me like, no, I really like that. I think that's a cool challenge and aspect. And it wasn't until my second
strategy into it.
Yeah, it's exactly. Yeah, it was my second playthrough when I gave up on the first one. I started over, and I started playing through it again, and I realized, wow, this really makes you think about how to use these weapons like intelligently, right? Because there's certain weapons that you don't want to overuse because you're gonna need them later, and certain ones that you don't really care about, so you can just use those, but they're not as powerful. But you know, they're whatever. It adds this aspect of how to strategize your how you're going to fight certain enemies in the game, I guess. And it's a cool thing you didn't even think about, that you really it's something you didn't really want from the game, that you didn't ask for, but once you got it, like it's like a welcome change to the way you strategize the game, I guess.
Mm-hmm. There's a video, like a really quick YouTube clip, and it says, gamer plays Breath of the Wild like Devil May Cry, and you should watch it because it's like a 3-minute video, and he's taking on one of the lion dudes in Breath of the Wild.
Oh, the Lionels.
Yeah, but you should see the way this guy plays it, because besides the weapon switching, there are like no pauses. Like he's like hitting it with this, you know, he like does like the bow, and then all of a sudden he hits it with the sword, but then he switches to a different sword for a different, you know, and it's just really, really cool. Just try to find the clip, because it's really awesome seeing him take down the lion in like a couple minutes, just playing with that crazy gameplay. And the fact that it's so versatile, it just is another testament as to why Breath of the Wild is so good, you know?
Well, and then one of the things we forgot to talk about was just the interactivity with that game, the environment, how you can interact, how you have, I forget what the tool's called, but that one that you can launch an object by adding force to it. I forget what it's called, but you can hit it and then it'll go flying off, right? And there are people who've done crazy things. I was going to say stasis, but that didn't sound right.
Yeah, somebody will correct us, I'm sure.
But
Ryan.
Yeah, Ryan. What is it called? And but the point is how creative players have been, like where they'll set up certain objects and then they'll whack it a few times and then jump on it so they can launch to different areas that either they weren't meant to get to, or they had to do it in a specific way and they changed the rules of the game. And that's how creative that game is. It's open enough where you can do those different things with these systems.
Well, that's how a lot of those. That's how those speedruns are happening now, right? They're exploiting a lot of those things, and I think I watched the last speedrun. It was around the 30-minute mark, from beginning to end.
Dang.
Yeah, it was
crazy,
insane what they could do with that game.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You know, one thing, like, if I were to do a Zelda game, I'd kind of play around with it, especially with the timeline, even though, you know, a lot of people wanted the timeline, maybe you didn't. I think what would be kind of cool is if you had the ocarina, but when you go to different times, like you actually also go to different games, and like so it actually changes, you know, from like Ocarina of Time to like Wind Waker, and even like the animation style, and it'd be, you know, self-contained in this world, but then you'd have to use the mechanics for that game to solve puzzles, you know, like in the past or in the future. I think that'd be really cool.
It truly would be a link between worlds.
Oh, come on. Just don't stop.
God damn it.
See, I'm perfect for this job.
But, you know, it's because, you know, whether it's like different universes or different timelines, I think it'd be kind of cool, at least, you know, for some people. For me, since I don't have strong feelings either way, like at least it, you know, to connect the timelines, I think that'd be kind of a cool way to do it. And then also just seeing the different art styles in the same game would be kind of cool. But and then also maybe do like a Zelda game where you do play as Zelda and you get to explore as Sheik, maybe as a prequel to Breath of the Wild. Well, Breath of the Wild specifically, like, you know, you have to play as Zelda to seal up Ganon.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I was always interested in the concept of, you know, playing a Sheik to see what happened in the 7 years in between, you know, Link traveling in time with Ocarina of Time.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think that would have been cool to see too.
Yeah. So, well, and for my, I'd call it like the Hand of Time, as opposed to Ocarina, because
The
time has
hand
to be in there, and hand is a kind of a neutral term. So,
see, everyone, making subtitles is an art. It takes a lot of work. It's not an easy job to do.
Mine would be. I think I came up with mine. It'd be a Octa rock out with your cock out.
The rock with your cock out.
Octa rock out with your cock out.
So on that note, did you gentlemen want to add any final thoughts to this podcast?
Ryan did confirm that it was referred to as a stasis rune, so it was stasis.
Okay.
And then he also wanted me to let you know.
That's the yellow one, right?
Yes, that's the yellow one.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Then he also wanted me to let you know, Frank, that back to the music, there is a 30th anniversary Legend of Zelda soundtrack available for purchase. And then there is a soundtrack of the concert, the Symphony that we're talking about, and a Breath of the Wild soundtrack. Okay. So those soundtracks are all available.
Yeah. Oh, I did actually manage to purchase a Twilight Princess soundtrack, but I think it was from the Club Nintendo one, where it came in the paper sleeve. I bought it at Game Vault actually because I had it there and it was like $10. I was like, yeah, why not? But yeah, I just, as far as physical media goes, I still really love collecting soundtracks, especially CDs, because that's going to be the highest quality. But with vinyl, speaking of which, as far as like collector's pieces, I know Bobby, you've got the biggest collection. Like, what's your favorite Zelda piece that you have? Because they didn't really come out with a whole lot of collector edition of stuff for Zelda.
No, not really. I mean, off the top of my head, because Zelda 1 had the gold cartridge. I don't even remember if Zelda 3 had anything like that, or the Link to the Past. We know Ocarina had the gold cartridge, and they had that gold box. Majora's Mask, came with an expansion pack for your N64. And Wind Waker, we said, came with that Master Quest. Twilight Princess didn't come with anything. Skyward Sword came with the gold Wiimote, which I do have that, and it also came with a soundtrack. And then
the ports for Wii U both had the amiibos.
Oh yeah, so
Twilight Princess and
did the Wind Waker have an amiibo as well?
Mm-hmm.
I know the Twilight Princess did. Unfortunately, the Wind Waker, I didn't get a physical copy. I only have the digital because you gave me your code for the digital.
I think it's not an amiibo. I think it's just Ganon. Here, I can go grab them.
Oh, I think he's right. I think it's a model of Ganon is what it is. Not an amiibo, but a model. And then Twilight Princess, the HD version, had the amiibo for the Wolf Link. And I got that one.
Oh, I remember seeing that. Yeah.
And then what was after that? Breath of the Wild there's 2 special editions for Breath of the Wild. I got the lighter one, which came with, I think I have it right here. It came with this Switch bag for you to carry your Switch around in, and it carries games and other stuff. Slate? Yeah, it's a Sheikah slate.
Sweet.
So yeah, that came with the Breath of the Wild, but the better edition came also with a copy of the Master Sword, a version of the Master Sword that you could put on display.
You don't have that one?
No, when I tried to pre-order it, they were already all out.
They sold out,
but you can buy the Master Sword separately. Like I was looking on eBay, they have it like in its own box. Like Nintendo sold it separately apparently, and they have it on there for like $30. So
cool.
And then the last special edition
is coming up, guys. Just a hint.
The last special edition they released was for the remake of Link's Awakening, and here in the States they only released it with sound. Did they release it with a soundtrack? Frank, do you remember?
I think so. It was
I think they did.
Mini art book kind of soundtrack.
Maybe, but I want to get the European version because I don't have it. But the European version has it comes with a replica of a Game Boy, and it's the steelbook cover for the game. So, but it looks like a Game Boy, and it has a screen from the Wind Waker. It's at the end of the game before you fight the final boss, where he plays all the instruments. I think is what the image is, and it comes with some other stuff in there. And I mean, again, another example where Europe gets a better version of a collector's edition than we do. And it's the same thing happened to me with Samus Returns, the remake of Return of Samus from Metroid. But that one I did get the European version. I bought it on eBay. It was a really good price, so I went ahead and ordered it. And then Frank, did you find it?
Yeah. So this is the one for Wind Waker. It does have a Ganondorf figure. I know it's a little hard to see. Yeah, so
I would have bought that. That's so cool.
Yeah, well, the one I got actually, so Gino had bought it from GameStop, but it came in damaged. It's kind of crushed a bit. So he ended up trading it for a new one, and since they had it there, I was like, well, I'll pick it up because I know it's going to be a collector's item, and yeah, it is. Even though it's damaged, it's still a pretty good collector's item. And then the one that did come with Amiibo was the Twilight Princess one for the Wii U.
I have.
There it is.
Oh, that's great with Midna on the back.
Yep.
Yes, with on the back. Yeah. And I really actually, it's funny because I bought this one at Game Vault, and I had traded in a couple games, and they're like, "Oh yeah, it's $60." And already on eBay, it was already starting to go for like $80, $90. So I was like, "Oh, I might as well pick it up too. I need games for my Wii U." So Oh, and then
go ahead.
what's it called? Majora's Mask, on 3DS. That one did come with the Skull Kid.
That's right. It came with a Skull Kid figure or like statuette. And my brother-in-law has that one.
Mm-hmm.
So Ryan just told me that there was a Game & Watch version of Legend of Zelda. I don't know when it came out, but he does say that one was special because the Game & Watch version has a working watch.
I remember having like a little like Zelda game watch when I was a kid.
Yeah, I remember at least one kid in elementary school had that.
Yeah, I don't think I might have been a friend that had it, but I remember like everyone like fighting for just to play it, and it's like just those shitty like Tiger Electronic type of things where it's just like the little hand moves back and forth. You press it looks all like ass.
Gaming up,
but
it was still important even back then because I remember playing when I got the Sonic the Hedgehog Tiger Electronic, I was like, this is amazing, and it was the biggest piece of shit.
Yeah, I had a Castlevania one, and I played that thing to death.
And
it was horrible.
I really loved the Double Dragon one. That one was actually the coolest, I thought.
But
I was like pressing in the screens really hard, and you could just see like their like a head pop up or just like an arm.
I could just imagine 1989 being in 4th grade out in the schoolyard. Kid's got his Tiger Electronics, and you show up, slowly reach into your pocket, whip out a Game Boy. It's like, check it out, boys. I'm playing with power now.
You know what? I remember, even though this is off topic, there was a guy who had all the attachments for the Game Boy. So when he brought it out, it had the lens and had the light and had the grip. And I'm just like, what the fuck?
If you want the Sega Game Gear experience without the actual Game Gear.
I still stand by the Game Gear. Oh, man, that was such a great handheld.
Its only problem was just the battery life, man.
Yeah, I totally agree. So getting back on task, anything else to add about?
Speaking of a good Legend of Zelda clone, a clone to the original that's really good is the Golden Axe on the Master System.
Oh, that's right.
I forgot.
Axe Battler. Was it?
Axe Battler. I think that's exactly what it's called.
It plays more like 2 because when you enter the battle scenes, it's side scrolling.
It's like a mix of both. Yeah, it's like the overworld is like the Legend of Zelda, like the first game, and then the battling is like part 2. And it's actually really well done. It has better graphics. Master System had better graphics in general, like flat out. It just didn't have, nobody bought the damn system. I don't know why, but I just think the way it was marketed and like the way they presented their games, like they were all the games looked uniform in a collection. So I think that turned a lot of gamers at the time off.
I think it was called Golden Axe Warrior.
I think that's it.
Yeah, something like that.
So I never even heard of that. Is it? Because I think of Golden Axe, I think of the arcade game, and then the Genesis port, which is kind of the same game. So is it completely different than?
It's completely different. It's literally like Legend of Zelda, dude. Like full on. It's like Zelda 1 and Zelda 2.
Mm-hmm.
You play it, dude. I remember I played it at my friend, one of my friend's houses. He had a Master System, and I remember it was exactly like Legend of Zelda. Some element, like graphic wise, definitely it was a better looking game graphic wise. But it just didn't like, because we already played Zelda. It wasn't anything like special.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But if it had come out before Zelda, like it would have it'd have been huge for them. But that wasn't the case.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Never heard of it. See,
it's a good clone. It's a good Legend Zelda clone.
When you mentioned clones, I thought you were going to mention a Crusader Ascenti. It was mentioned by the gaming historian a few months back, and it looks like a ripoff of Link to the Past, but apparently it's got more to it than that. And I had a Genesis growing up, as you know, in my preteen to teens, so I didn't have a Super Nintendo. And if that game had come out, like, I mean, it did come out in the US, but it wasn't marketed at all. But I kind of wish it was, because that would have been a game that I would have loved to have owned, because I was always jealous of Super Nintendo owners for Legend of Zelda, Link to the Past, and other games like that. So,
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you want to play a Legend of Zelda clone that is reminiscent of Ocarina of Time, but is more beautiful like Wind Waker, you should play Okami.
Mm.
Is that the dog one?
Yes.
The wolf.
It's,
or whatever the hell it is. Yeah, you're a wolf dog. Yeah.
What version would you consider a good version of that game? Because it's on everything.
Well, I mean, the PS3 version I hear is probably the best. I haven't played it. I personally played it on the Wii because you can use the motion controls to use the paintbrush. But but I heard the PS3 version is probably the best one to play. Though,
I have it on PS4, but still, it's still packaged.
Well, but it's
still wrapped.
I think it's still based on that PS3 version, though.
Yeah, PS3 version. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And I also have that PS4 version. So yeah, you'll be fine playing that one. Such a damn good game. It's a long game though. It'll take you a while to beat, but it's really good.
Okay.
And there's a character named Ishin. He's like a little cricket. Is that what he is?
Mm-hmm.
And he's a dirty pervert. You'll love him.
I have another one that's actually another great Legend of Zelda clone. I have it. Let me bring it real quick.
Man, if it's Star Fox Adventures, I'm turning this thing off.
Can't believe they cut their legs off so that they can fit in their stupid ships. It's just.
Oh, that's right.
What is that?
What is that? I can't even tell.
Oh, what is it called? Something Heroes.
3D dot Game Heroes.
That one.
What the hell is that?
What's your section? Just Val, just find it on PS3. Just play it. It is such the coolest. It's kind of like a parody of the original Legend of Zelda game, but it's like in this cool, like blocky, full 3D world. It's cool. Like you could upgrade your sword to the point where it goes the length of the whole screen and the width of the whole screen. The game's ridiculous, man. And it's like the cutest little story. I think like you and Alice, you and your wife, like playing it together would have a lot of fun.
I like how she became she who shall not be named in this.
What's it called again?
3D. I always have a name with a hard time with the title. 3D dot Game Heroes.
Reading is hard.
Dot. Okay, I'm gonna write.
You know how much I only. And look at this. It actually came with a full color guide.
Hey,
PS3 game full color guide.
very cool.
How cool is that?
All right, before this drags on any longer, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. So, Aldo, thank you for returning. Same with you, Val, and of course, Bobby. I really, really enjoyed talking about this with you all, especially since I'm not, like I said, a huge fan of the series, but, just getting your insights really, really makes me appreciate the series a little bit more. And, just to kind of add this in, thank you all for listening, whether, you're driving or you're actually paying attention to this. We love doing this, and I'm glad that considering everything that's going on with COVID, it helps to be able to still hang out with my friends, and thank you all for listening. And if, make sure you're talking to somebody, make sure you're touching base with family, friends, just so that you get that little bit of, renew your soul so that you're not so isolated. But thank you all, gentlemen, and thank you all for listening, and have a good night or a good day.
Yeah, well put, Frank.
Thanks,
you.
guys.
Y'all take care.
Night.
Yeah. Good night.
Link, here come to town, come to save the Princess Zelda. Got it put away. Now the children don't play.
Whoa. System of a Down is a Zelda fan? He might well be, but that's not System of Down. I know. I was shocked too. The song, simply titled Zelda, was performed by the band Rabbit Joint. Check out the Kotaku article linked in the description below for more information. I think this song is a testament to the appeal of The Legend of Zelda. You can find Zelda media everywhere, and not just Nintendo created products. Fan art, fan fiction, fan music, fan games, fan memes, the list goes on and on. The property may be developed and owned by Nintendo, but The Legend of Zelda is loved by its fans. And it's our love of the series that keeps Nintendo's hard at work on bringing us more Zelda. That and our money. Hey, let's be real. Well, that does it for this episode. Thanks for listening to our first podcast of 2021. We here at OC Gamer would like to wish you a happy new year and look forward to delivering more great content for you to enjoy. Please continue to be safe and stay healthy. Peace!
But they will Link say today, hallelujah! Now Link, fill up your hearts so you can shoot your sword with power.
This episode of the Obsessive Compulsive Gamer Podcast was produced by Bobby, edited by Mike B, and hosted by Frank. If you would like to know more about the music used in this episode, please check the link in the description. Thanks for watching and listening. Check out our website at ocgamer.org for more episodes and articles on gaming.